Hello and welcome to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past and talk about their impact and relevance today. I'm Tim Longo Jr., and I'm joined, as always, by a man named Elivaud.
Taturb Elivaud is my name. It's Brett Duville here. It's funny you say that because when I was a child...
Here it comes.
I don't know if you ever saw one of these. I don't know if I've mentioned on the cast before either, but when I was a kid, it was a thing to have personalized like children's books.
I didn't.
I had one, I believe. It was about my pet giraffe or something like that. It had art and all that stuff, but then it was like kind of badly printed. I don't know if like they pre-printed it and then like they typed in the names. I can't really remember. I think my parents still have it, but
who wrote the book? Like, is it pre-written or?
Yeah, the book was pre-written. It was one story, and then they just put in like your name.
Yeah, right. They just substitute your
exactly. And then I remember because the friendly giraffe's nickname was Taturb.
Right.
So that's stuck with me. Anyway, Baldur's Gate.
Baldur's Gate. Elivaud. Duville backwards.
Elivaud.
Yeah, I wasn't sure exactly how to pronounce it, but
tough one to come up with.
Yeah, but Baldur's Gate. This is our. I guess we decided sort of our second to last episode, but this is kind of closing down the main game, basically the story of the game and everything, and we'll do takeaways next time we talked about.
Yeah, and catch up on a lot of email because this has brought in a lot of email as well, which has been interesting because I've talked before about we always get tons of Nintendo email. This is one I did not expect to get this much on, but it is kind of a huge game, so I guess like I do remember how big a deal it was when it came out, and I guess that is reflected in how much email we've been getting. So it also kind of hits in that sweet spot too of people who are listening to podcasts, I guess, right? So who were kids maybe or teens when this came out, and are mostly our audience. So I know we have a wide ranging audience, but not as many, not relatively few who are as old as Tim, but in general, quite a variance. But
well, I mean, on the
email from younger people.
On the flip side of the Nintendo factor for a lot of them, like you've always mentioned, I think on the flip side of that, like as far as PC games go, this is like one of those, right? Yeah. It's like as far as like PC games from the 80s and 90s or what have you, it's like this is like one on the few of the list that is almost everyone played who was a PC gamer at least. So I now in retrospect I see that makes sense. It'd be that much email.
And, and certainly as we've said, the game that put BioWare on the map. And of course, that's a map that you've seen less of than I have. You see what I did there? Because you did sort of straight to the end or straight through the whole story play, whereas I did more every bit of side content play. And we should probably get right into that because
that's what I was going to suggest.
It's meant some specific things that you had to do to be able to finish.
For sure. I'll definitely share that. But I mean, as far as like, covering the extra, side stuff that you did, like, what highlights would you
so I ended up doing some stuff that I was like, man, I can't believe I don't remember this. And it turned out to be reasonable because it was stuff that was in Tales of the Sword Coast, which was the expansion for this game and which I never played. So I haven't played it before. So that was a big surprise to have. And I was like, what is going on? Why do I not remember this? And of course it was because I'd never played it. So I was like, and it was some of my favorite stuff actually was this one storyline, which was all about going to this island. And there were these werewolves all over it and stuff like that. It was really pretty cool. I really actually liked that story, and it went all kinds of places. It was extremely difficult, which also kind of would have clued me in that it was side content or expac content, because it was hard. It was a real challenge. I had to pull out every stop. Started using potions that I had never drunk before. I discovered that one of my potions was not what it appeared to be, which was kind of funny. I didn't tell you that in pre-show.
No.
I think Khaled had like 2 or 3 oils of speed in his inventory, and I had him drink one, and there were these they look sort of like, I don't know, is there a Snapple bottle that has like a weird like color pattern all over it? It's like a painted bottle, or maybe it's Arizona tea or something. Anyway, it reminded me of that, of like a tie-dye kind of looking thing with all these like psychedelic colors kind of all through it.
Yeah.
And if you drink that, it's actually a potion of confusion.
Oh, how funny.
And it doesn't tell you, and you don't know that it's that, right? And I did it 3 times before. I'm like, what is going on? Did he drink too many potions and this is a weird side effect? Like, I was totally because that was the thing. That was like a mixing potions thing, was like a thing that you could do back in 1st and 2nd edition, and like that it would have weird effects. And I was like, maybe he's just doing that. I was like, that's weird that the random number generator would keep turning this up. And then finally I'm like, okay, well, I'll just have him drink the potion of speed. And then it happened again. I'm like, aha. I thought that was hilarious. That was also a good moment in that I had actually forgotten about. So there's just kind of a lot going on in that one quest, which involved being shipwrecked on an island which was occupied on one half by humans and the other half by werewolves, who were always in werewolf form. I think almost maybe there was one group who were not in the sort of final lair that you went into. The werewolves were really tough because they take magic weapons only, magic and silver weapons only to take damage. And then the greater werewolves, besides, heal. They have restorative powers, so they're basically Wolverine. They're messing you up. And
nothing worse than a healing werewolf.
They recover really fast. Like, it felt unbalanced. It felt like they're healing, X points per round, and I can't hit often enough to do consistently damage, in a round. I ended up using a lot of magic items and things like that to get through that. Anyway, I did really like the story though, because you fight those, you go back to the village, and they're like, yeah, those things are terrible. You should become one of us now. And it turns out the whole village is also werewolves, and so I had to fight my way out of that. I mean, it just kept going. It was good little story.
That's cool. So was it that there were 2 different factions, or
it was basically yes, there were basically the ones who had gone back to nature as much as possible and had no civilization and were living kind of in this ruin, and then the other ones who were trying to like still do agriculture and whatever and blend in and the person who had sent you there, it turns out it was his wife or something who he was trying to recover and figure out where she had gone, because they were elves. Some of them were elves, I guess, maybe. I don't know. There was ins and outs I didn't quite follow. But if you didn't kill the guy who sent you, you contracted lycanthropy and would turn into a werewolf when you next traveled. So it just kept going. Like, I was like, I don't want to fight this guy. He's really hard. He was another one of those greater werewolves, which were actually called wolfwares for some reason. It was weird. Anyway, it was good. It was good side content. And once I realized that was not in the original game, I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. It's more difficult. It's a sort of late game thing. When you've explored all the rest of the map, go up to this weird town in the far northeast of the map, and have all these other weird side quests, including Durlag's Tower, which I did not complete. So,
yes, shout out to Greg, who came on to one of my streams and asked specifically about Durlag's Tower. And I, excuse me, I had assumed you would have done it because you're doing side content, but he said it was quite rough and long. I think he said 15 to 20 hours or something, or maybe it was 10, but quite a long time for just that one section. So, sorry, Greg, you were alone in your endeavor. Good luck on that.
Yeah, fun.
But so what is? So I'm interested in the structure of that. So how? So the Tales from the Sword Coast was essentially fully integrated seamlessly into the game. So you didn't, how are you finding these quests? Just the way that you find anything, and then it just, do you know what I mean? Like it wasn't tagged, or it wasn't like.
Yeah, I think at some point, it wasn't tagged in any way. So it was just incorporated, and it just things appeared on the map. And I guess if you had already played it.
Like what chapter was it in? Where was the werewolf thing housed in? Was it in its own?
You could have gone to do that, I think, as early as chapter maybe 3, in which case you would have gotten worked. First of all, although you wouldn't have been able to get into Baldur's Gate actually. So to be able to do it, there was preparatory stuff you had to do to get these sea charts from. I forget. You had to get these sea charts from some merchant company,
like the Harbor Master building.
Yeah, it wasn't in the Harbor Master. There's like a separate mercantile building, which was like north of the place you initially enter Baldur's Gate. So technically, I guess you really couldn't do it until chapter 5 because you couldn't have gotten into Baldur's Gate to do that part of the quest. It does. It would limit. Yeah, it would gate you that way, but it was on the map before then for quite a while. Somebody must have mentioned it to me at some point, some NPC, and put it on my map. I can vaguely remember that, so I think that's how that happened. I remember it turning up and it being way off in the corner. It was like, well, I'll get to that someday. Thinking that there was a ton of stuff between it and the next nearest. And there really wasn't. It was kind of like that was out there and you could just kind of go there and it took you, 2 days of in-game time or whatever to get there. So,
yeah. Early Goths, whatever, right? Wasn't it called? Is that the one?
Elgoths. Yeah.
Elgoths, yeah.
Weird.
Somebody told me about it too, but I didn't go up there. Yeah, it's just interesting the structure of that, because I guess if you had played Baldur's Gate originally and then bought the Tales of the Sword Coast later, it's just kind of fascinating how you then go back to the game, because essentially you would have killed Sarevok and
right.
Sarevok,
I think you would have had to load a save that was before the end of the game, because the game ends. There's no way for it to continue.
Right.
So
right.
I think it would have basically put you in that state, or you would have had to play again, which would have been a big ask.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. It basically just adds more quests, right, to the map essentially, and then the other thing is like how the leveling is hard for you at your level. The game goes beyond where you were hypothetically, right? I guess maybe, do you get more XP for playing on hard? Maybe that's I feel like there was a formula there that I'm forgetting. But if you play, you might get more XP if you play on a harder difficulty. So maybe that's how you get up to like level 20 or something. I just can't imagine.
You can't get to level 20. This game taps out at like 9 or 10 or something like that.
Okay. So yeah, whatever the max is though, like you did almost all the side content though. So I mean,
the only thing I didn't do was Durlag's Tower and the Nashkel Carnival, which was on my map, as soon as you got down to Nashkel, and I just, for whatever reason, never went there thinking, oh, it's a carnival, who cares? And I'm sure there's something good there. I apologize to whatever level designer set that up, or scripter, because it just didn't appeal to me for some reason. There were a couple other things I didn't do, mostly because I forgot that I hadn't done them. Like I stopped looking at by the time I needed to refer back to my map that I had marked of all the places I had been and what I still had to do, I had pretty much internalized the map, and there were only like a couple very minor things, like individual monsters or whatever, that I had not killed, that I was like, not worth it. They would not have been worth it for the XP. It would have been like 20 XP or player or something like that. But I did go back and do the spider dude, and I did the wyverns. There were actually 2 wyvern caves. One I think just had like 2 babies, an adult, and one that had like 4-2 or something like that. 3-2 maybe. I don't
Yeah,
remember.
I think I found that one too.
That was tough. Yeah.
No, I just ran away. Yeah.
Tough battle. Yeah, I definitely really leveraged all of the systems, including the quick saving, to do this. I think it's really so different from D&D in that way, right? It's just like it's really a tactical, a tactical game with sort of D&D gloss, in a lot of ways, especially because of the quick save and quick load, which obviously you don't have that opportunity in D&D.
Right. Yeah. The save system is sort of a big replacement for not having an actual DM who is kind of auto balancing, as you go or something like that. Just to, in case, to make sure that people aren't dying left and right. So I feel like that's the Band-Aid there. But yeah, I mean, I feel like the game's basically balanced around the save system as far as I'm concerned. Like, I think they're really, they're assuming you're going to be using it pretty liberally.
Yeah.
It feels like based on the way that it was balanced, but yeah. Cool. Well, I mean, it's definitely structurally a game like we talked about, I think last episode, about that exploration and just living in the world of Dungeons and Dragons and Forgotten Realms and stuff, like just all the different zones and all that different extra content. Cause it's having played it in the past that way and then playing it this way, it's, I don't want to say two completely different games, but it just is not the same experience at all. You almost don't even feel like you're playing Dungeons and Dragons in a way. I don't know why, because I think so much for me about either the tabletop or any CRPG that I typically play, because I do tend to be a completionist, as you know, and so much about the world in Dungeons and Dragons is that sense of just going off and finding stuff, that may not be critical to what's going on. And so it's kind of it was a foreign playthrough for me. Obviously I was time constrained, so that was some of my motivation, but it did end up being an experiment as well. And as I think I might have predicted from the beginning, it did backfire absolutely on me. Which maybe we can, I don't know if we want to segue to some of the sort of ending phases.
Yeah, we'll move into the ending stuff for sure. Because you, I mean, to touch briefly, I guess, on this sort of D&D feeling, one of the things that is interesting is that I also feel like the game shows you a lot more of what's going on with the story a lot more clearly than happens typically in D&D as well. If you know what I mean. It's like we're both months into campaigns as DMs and as players, and we don't really know what's going on still. Yeah. Right. And this is by the time you get to, I guess, chapter 3 or whatever, you have a pretty good sense of everything that's going on, except for the sort of I have the murder god in me. But even that, it's pretty easy to read between the lines of like, oh, I'm having these weird dreams of like blood pools and stuff, and there's all this skeletal imagery, and there's that book, and like you kind of get that there's some kind of god story going on, and so you kind of like, there aren't really a lot of mysteries at that point on the main story, and so it really becomes about going on and finding places that you haven't been, and there's so much combat because it's a CRPG, right? That it just that all of that sort of balance feels very different to me than from the tabletop. So well, and there's also like structurally, like from the beginning, you are given, like if you just take the journal as an example, you're given a journal, and from the beginning, you are always going to have, I think what they call it, important events, whatever that. Yep. That little that one particular item is in each of the chapters. There's always going to be one of those, right? But everything else in the journal is found. It's populated based on what you're exploring, and so structurally that is the breadcrumbs that they're going to give everybody is there. And so if you follow the important events thing, which is essentially what I did, right? I just used that as my guide. And so the journal beyond that is just completely scalable based on what you discover. And I guess kind of my point is like tabletop doesn't have a journal like that.
unless you're like,
Right.
I guess, writing your own note in the notes form. And so there
Or
isn't
if you
that
have
sort
a
of
person who's writing out in character what happens.
right. There is that for the audience. Brett, in the game that I'm running, that Brett is playing in, Samia Phantasmi, who is the character he played in Baldur's Gate. Have I not told this? Neither of us told this story?
This hasn't come up. No, actually.
Okay, so it's brilliant. So it has to be spoken at least a bit. So he is writing. So I'm not doing recaps for my game because I'm lazy and I don't have time. So he's doing recaps essentially as a player, but through the voice of Samia, but written from the perspective of a historian who is interviewing Samia in the future, kind of like old Bilbo style. Like somebody's interviewing Samia after his adventuring career. He's an older halfling at that point, well past the events that we're playing. And so he's in this person's interviewing him, and that's how the recaps are happening for. So it's through Sammy's memory essentially, right? And it's brilliant. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Great fun.
It's also been fun to do. I mean, I used to love in Dragon magazine there would have the in character conversations with like Elminster and stuff like that in the
right
in the sort of third edition era, and I've always loved that sort of thing. It's corny, but it's fun to do. So
well, the reason I mentioned Bilbo is I think obviously, and I know you're a big fan of the books, and so it's like I feel like it feels like I'm it's a kind of a Bilbo feel, right? Like he's returned to Hobbiton and he's kind of telling some hobbits historian, the Matron Society, I think they're called, or something like that. And
not me, I don't remember that.
Yeah, that's only because I play the MMO, so that's
right.
the prominent part of that that MMO. But anyway, yeah. So he's and so it's like he's telling the stories of which is the Hobbit is kind of that.
I also have a plan for if he dies. So which is. Okay. ties into his character in particular, so we'll see if that ever happens. But
interesting. Okay, I might have a theory on
you
that.
You probably have a good idea. Yeah.
Interesting.
Anyway.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah. So I mean, yeah, but using that essentially that hook, right, which you don't have in a tabletop, and something that, to your point, like structurally, and we talked about this too, that in the game that I'm running, which is versus yours is more linear. The Icewind Dale one is more open world structurally. And so the quote unquote main story, if you will, as we're talking about in the context of Baldur's Gate, the main story, you guys are much more heavily making up because of the order that you're doing things. And so, and obviously I don't want to reveal anything to you as a player, but some of the conclusions you're coming to on what is main story and what is not, and how they're related and all that, like that stuff is not a thing. You're just putting 2 and 2 together and getting 5, so
right.
It's fascinating to see that. And it's going to make its own story. So long story short, like your version of Baldur's Gate, obviously, because you had the werewolf adventure and you had the whatever, and mine, even in the context of it hand holding me and, and you through the main storyline, there still is some room in there to have your own quote unquote story of Baldur's Gate, which we've talked a little bit about, but it felt, and then for me, it ended up feeling like a lesser experience by the time I got to the end. So I guess we got a little off track there. But
no, it's fine. I mean, you just saw less of it, and you had less of the joy of just uncovering new parts of the map and the little weird things that would happen on them, and additional characters that you would find, potential party members and things like that, or like, oh, here's some red wizards of Thay, or whatever. I mean, it just had lots of little side things, which, in a lot of cases might be just fan service for like, oh, cool, I got to kill basilisks, or oh, cool, like I said, the red wizards or something. It was certainly a very interesting experience, and I'm not the lore guy, but you can definitely see the the Forgotten Realms stuff kind of all over this, and Drizzt too. So
yeah, which I never found. Yeah. And I mean, and I just think that it seems like they did a great job at being fans themselves, and it was a lot of fan service in a good way. You're going to locations, that you want to go to. You have an occasional Elminster, encounter, etc. Right. And so it's like kind of those fan moments that you really do want. And Baldur's Gate, I feel like, speaking of getting, through the ending sequences, I feel like as a city, I don't remember if we talked about this last episode because that's when we initially got there, but Baldur's Gate as a city, you go through all of these zones out in the wilderness and then you get to the city and it's also multiple zones. And it felt like, you got to the big city, I feel like they really fulfilled that fantasy of like, oh my gosh, I'm here. The bridge going into the city is a zone in and of itself. So it makes it feel like it's big, and then you're going from zone to zone within, and each district kind of has its own little mini story or mini like theme, if you will. I didn't, see all the stories. But then they kind of they have the Iron Throne sort of plot that is peppered throughout with doppelgangers and, and kind of all the politics and stuff. It is funny how trade and merchant centric the whole thing ends up being.
It's funny though. I think of that as actually kind of a Forgotten Realms story anyway, because there's always this intrigue that's going on. I think in Forgotten Realms. So I don't. Yeah. I think the nuts and bolts of it are a little tedious, or just not memorable. Like I mean, until we replayed it, if you had asked me, I would have been like, "Yeah, aren't you like a son of a god or something?" And that would have been the thing I remembered, not the. Oh yeah, and there's this iron shortage that is being manufactured to put somebody into power. Like I forgot all of that. Like that was his whole thing.
Well, the iron,
he just wanted to get in power so that he could, murder lots of people.
Yeah,
so he could become the god of murder, right?
Fulfill his destiny or something. Yeah. Well, I mean that's so that's it's it's funny. Let's see what year. So this was. Yeah, so we can say that George Lucas basically ripped off the story of Baldur's Gate to create Episode 1 because the Phantom Menace is kind of about the same thing, right? It's the trade federation and all of the nonsense with all of that stuff was just a feint for the eventual Palpatine, and Palpatine used it to, so it's a master
his own god of murder.
Exactly. So it's the same. The Star Wars episode, the prequels based on Baldur's Gate. You heard it here. So no. Sure. Yeah. Anyway, but I guess we actually covered this before, and that there was sort of like in the collective subconscious and consciousness of every of the era.
Yeah, for sure.
Going on in the US at least. Yeah. Yep. So but anyway, I mean, I think going into the ending, so we hit Baldur's Gate. I mean, I don't know if there's anything specific we want to talk about the city, but obviously you found a lot more of the nooks and crannies, I'm sure. I did really enjoy the doppelganger theme. I've always been a big doppelganger fan in D&D in general because I think they're so fun as a concept, and I did remember from playing it originally and then appreciating it again here of just like you never know who's won, and
right.
I did one of the few side things I did do was that was it the Merchants Guild or something where there was a banquet for one of the members up and upstairs where they're doing like it was his birthday or something or an anniversary, and then you go up there. Find that. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah. So I think it's the Merchants Guild. So it's one of the guilds that the Iron Throne was manipulating essentially, and so you go up there and. And there's this one guy who's his anniversary, or everyone's telling me that it's his anniversary, and then I go talk to him, and it's like, hey, what is going on? You know, there's some weird stuff going on in this Merchants Guild. I forget even who asked me to go investigate this. Might have been Scar or something, but. And then he's like, no, it's not my anniversary. We should go see what's going on. And you go up there and there's this big party, this big banquet. And they're like, welcome, it's a happy anniversary or whatever. And then they all turn into doppelgangers like instantly. And there's like literally 20 doppelgangers up there to fight. And so,
wow.
Yeah. So anyway, but that, you know, that theme kept happening throughout the end of the game. Like it seemed like there was always somebody turning into doppelgangers. So that was fun.
Yeah, no, I mean, so I had rescued the Duke. Part of this plan is that he is killing the existing leaders of Baldur's Gate, the Dukes of Baldur's Gate, I guess. And one of them is still alive but ill, so he's kind of been taken out of the picture. And at some point he was in the Flaming Fist building, but that was taken over by doppelgangers at this point, or by people in the sway of Sarevok. They weren't all doppelgangers, but his healer was. So I had to get into him. That was also tricky. I had to use my main character, who was a thief and could hide in shadows, and then another character took an invisibility potion, because once I killed the doppelganger, I couldn't then carry the Duke out because I didn't have enough weight. I couldn't carry enough weight. My weak little thief, halfling. So, yeah.
I didn't even realize you could carry people. That's hilarious. I guess I never.
Yeah, there's a few cases where you can't. That spider lair thing has a dead body in it. That's very heavy. I had to like dump everything off of one character so I could carry him back to his brother. There's a couple other places, but
right, the brother. Nice. That's right. I remember that. Yeah. So why don't you?
Sorry, spoilers. He didn't make it.
Yeah. Well, but you brought back proof. So why don't you? I mean, as a segue there, you should maybe talk about, like, especially some of the ending sequences. And maybe I would guess maybe an example might be the Iron Throne itself going up the 5 floors or something. But you definitely leveraged thievery and sneaking around, and kind of like the non-combat mechanics more than I did. I had a cleric as my main anyway, so Imoen was my only one. I used her sometimes, but you were definitely leveraging that. So what were some of the ways?
I was, and I think that it's because I have a tendency to do it when I play Samia in your campaign, as he goes stealth all the time, and I sort of think of it as his superpower. And I'd put a ton of points into that as well as he levels. So I'm like, well, I got it. This is his big thing. And I never put things into like pickpocketing, but I always put it into the stealth and trap finding. So
right.
So yeah, to find out what's going on with the doppelgangers, to have to go back to Candlekeep. Instead of fighting them at all, I went up most of the building with the party. And actually I did go up to the top floor, and like all these doppelgangers popped out, and I went, oh, right, doppelgangers, and reloaded. And then I sent my thief up there, because when you're inside of one of these buildings, like, you can send individual players into different sections of the map. They're kind of all, it's allowed. Like, you don't have to gather your party to go between different floors. So I just would take Sammy and I ran him up in stealth and went and just looked into every room. And found, at some point you have to find a document or something.
Oh yeah, no, I know the document you mean. Yeah, so you just snuck past that. That was actually a rough battle for me.
That was a tough battle. I got killed once in there. I was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to fight this. I might have tried twice or something. It's also like, I don't know if any of these people are human, and they haven't, and I don't want to kill anybody and lose all the reputation. Who knows if that matters, but so I'm trying to play a good guy generally, and my powerful spells are things like fireball, and it's a tight space, so it's just like, it's really a tough battle. But yeah, I went and stealthed. I walked around and found a room that had a desk or something with a document on it, and I was like, oh, this is what I need. And then I think I left and I got the chapter end. I might have got the chapter end just for finding the document, actually, now that I think about it. And I was like, oh, okay, cool, I'm done. Now I'm at Candlekeep. So it was very funny.
Yeah, that would have been the end of the chapter there too. Yeah,
I guess
so.
it sends you to scars. Somebody has to give you a book so you can get into Candlekeep. But however it happens, I don't remember the particulars. Yeah, but yeah, you had gotten. You're mentioning the difficulty there. You had some difficulty here at the end of the game.
So yeah, the difficulty for me, as I think we kind of predicted, at least I predicted in this playthrough, it basically just came back to bite me. And I would say the where I noticed it starting to really be bad was what we just talked about, getting to the Iron Throne in that chapter. So that would have been the end of chapter 5 for the first time and going up. Going up the 5 floors for me, there's actually quite a bit of talking you can do to get through most of the floors without fighting. So I did that. And then there's the sort of Lady Tar who, you may or may not remember that sort of exchange.
Emissary Tar, yes.
Emissary Tar, yeah. And so there was multiple ways where, you get up there and finally you're talking to that party up there that you end up having to fight. And one of the voice lines there, or one of the selections for the dialogue choices was, you can say that you're Emissary Tar, right? But she's standing there. And so I was trying to figure out a way to get her to not allow her to go up there. So when I go up there at the end, I can say I'm Emissary Tar and, they would believe me. I probably reloaded that 10 times trying to figure out all the different sort of scenarios, never found a way to do it because I didn't want to do the fight.
That is a perfect example of where tabletop differs is that in tabletop, a DM would go, oh, I hadn't thought of that. That's kind of cool, and now would be a thing, right? I mean, we've certainly had those moments. Don't hands off the merchandise. So,
Yeah, and so as it turns out, which you wouldn't have seen because I think because you snuck through, or maybe you did see it, but Emissary Tar is a doppelganger, and the rest of them,
and her actual body is up there as well.
Yeah, and her body is there. So it's a nice little. I put a note down specifically about Tar because I thought it was a nicely done sort of series of events. Because then you see her body as well, so you know kind of how it all went down.
It accentuates what you like about the doppelgangers, which is like they're kind of a horror element as well, right? Because like it could be anybody. And here's the body of the person whose place it's taken. Right. That was a very memorable moment for me as well.
Right. So but then on that fight, kind of it was just a downward spiral from there because I probably was maybe level 6 or 5 or 6 at that point, and on an average, and I'm at a disadvantage at that point. Not only so there's two sort of axes that. Or really, I guess maybe 3, but the 2 main ones to realize, obviously there's XP, right? So not doing all the side content, I'm not doing the leveling up. And as we kind of talked about, they probably from a balancing perspective found some sort of middle ground between like doing everything and doing nothing. And that's maybe where they balanced toward. Who knows how they did the math on it. So I'm obviously on the low end of that. So not only am I not getting XP and thus I'm going down quickly, or my AC's low, or whatever it is, or my AC's high, however you want to say it. And then my AC's bad. But then also the thing that dawned on me late in the game is you get gear, you get interesting magic items throughout. This isn't a game where you grind like a Diablo, where you can kind of grind the same content to kind of like get some of the RNG from items that drop, right? These items are placed throughout the game in very discrete places. And so if I'm not doing the extra content, I'm not getting some of the fancier magic items that are actually powering me up. And so I kind of dawned on me toward the end, like I'm finding very few, like my almost none of my characters had not one of my characters had every slot full of everything. Like I had barely had outfitted everybody. I was largely using magic items in their slots. I mean, so I probably could have bought non-magic items to fill them out, but I just remember playing through before and like having everybody's all decked out, you know, and
Right.
and I had a lot of options. But so that's another balancing factor that you don't get by mainlining it. And so basically every fight for me devolved into before I moved it to easy, and then for the very I'll be completely honest, for the very last fight, I moved it to actual story mode. I turned story mode on, which is a complete cheat, you know, for sure. But I wouldn't have been able to see the end. But anyway, easy for probably the last, you know, from then. Nah, I don't know if I must have put easy on at that point, or it might have been the maze where I put easy on. But in that particular,
isn't difficult. So yeah,
Candlekeep wasn't bad, no. And in fact, I want to talk about Candlekeep because you said you liked that one specifically, and then I wanted to actually ask how you resolved it too, because I kind of happened into a resolution that I kind of accidentally did. But anyway, yeah. So I was kind of exploiting. I would start the battle like that one in Iron Throne. I would run downstairs, trying to separate the enemy party, you know, and kind of just whittle them down. A lot of reloading, a lot of hoping for the random, you know, rolls to go my way, and a lot of reloading. So it was the ending was grueling for me. It was just completely grueling. I felt like I couldn't even use. I did have AI on a lot of the time, but when things got rough, I would turn it, you know, I would basically hand command people, but I felt like it wasn't even a tactical game for me because I was so underleveled. You know, I didn't have as many choices that I would have wanted, especially in the spell category, because my spellcasters weren't high enough level to have all the fancy stuff. So, but yeah, Candlekeep.
I had so many. I mean, everybody had great gear. Like Sammy, I had +3 short sword of backstabbing or something.
Oh, jeez.
And it was, yeah. So it was like he was hiding in the middle of battle all the time, trying to hide in shadows just so he could get another backstab in. It was pretty. That was pretty wild.
That's cool.
Yeah, that was pretty neat. I was glad that it played into that, you know, and you know, I found a +3 staff for Jaheira. I can't remember what
wow
ended up with, but it was pretty good. You know, it was a lot of that. I mean, just everybody had good weapons. I think a +2 bow for Imoen, and
I had no +3 anything.
Yeah, I mean, I even had a +4, but it was specifically for lycanthropes, so that was not super useful. But well, yeah, I don't know. It was interesting. I hadn't considered that as a problem for you, you know, because I also had a million different spells. I mean, there are times where I would be like, I'm going to need, you know, XYZ to deal with this. Oh, look, I have knock. I'll just rest here and I'll get knock, and I'll open this chest that I pick, you know, or whatever. So there were things like that as well. So
yeah, I just didn't get that high.
I could try out different strategies as well. Let me, you know, those particularly tough battles, I could literally look at my spells. Jaheira had Doom at one point, which lowers saving throws. I was doing that so I could maybe make it easier to get the paralyze on that big, you know, werewolf. And it was just like, I had a lot of tactical options, way more than I could use, to be honest. There were so many spells that it was difficult to do. And that's a thing that I find a little hard to, I mean, when you have 6 characters, 2 of them are spellcasters, you have a lot of options. And that's tough. Yeah, it's tough. Another way it differs from the tabletop. Anyway, let's talk Candlekeep. What was so we go back to Candlekeep. They let us in because we have a book. They're like, yeah, we know you here. You know, okay, you brought a book. You're allowed to come back in. Be quiet in the library. You're forced to go to the library, which is funny because all my party members are like, oh, I'm so tired. And you can't go to, I'm like, oh, I'll go to the inn and we'll all rest. And they're like, nope, can't rest now. I'm like, really? They're all telling me how tired they are. But what did you do in the library? You said you found kind of a weird or interesting.
Well, so they kind of allude to there being a way to confront, I forget the name of the guy that starts with an R, Relizer. Realtor, yeah. So you're going to find him, right? Because he's kind of doing some of the dealings for the Iron Throne or whatever. And they kind of like, I forget how it's presented, but they allude to the fact that you may not need to kill him to deal with him. And actually in the journal, it even says, like, there's an entry that says, "I'm not a murderer." And so I was like, interesting. So I talked to him and then confronted him sort of, but then said, well, I forget how it kind of exactly what I said, but it kind of resolved and we didn't get into a fight, but they were still standing there. So then I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll just walk around for a while. Kept going up and up and up. And then you get to one of the levels and there's a guard guy up there who comes over and essentially says, arrests you, even though I didn't kill him, and says, "You're the murderer. We're arresting you for the murder of blah blah blah." And I was for the Iron Throne lackeys down there, and I was like, "Wait a second! I didn't kill him. I didn't even touch him." And then it dawns on me what they're doing there is Sarevok, whose name was backwards at that point.
Yes.
Had framed you.
Hence the intro, yes.
Hence the intro, yeah. So, which I don't remember how to actually say that backwards, but
Kovaros or Koravos?
Koravos, yeah.
Koravos, yeah.
We'll go with Koravos. So Koravos basically frames you, even though I didn't take him out, and so I guess the guard thought, I don't know if it was a bug or what, but it felt legitimate.
No, that's what happened to me as well, actually.
Okay. Okay.
Actually, I didn't want to fight Realtar, so I had run into them and had initiated a fight kind of accidentally. I don't know if it was like dialogue options and it kind of trapped me into combat. And I was like, well, I don't like that. It's a library. It's where I grew up. I'm not crazy about this. And also I'm not a murderer. So I specifically reloaded and searched elsewhere in the library at that point. So in my actual playthrough, I never met Realtar at all.
Mm-hmm.
But I did run into Sarevok, who
gave you the ring.
And was like, gave you the ring, and then I get arrested. Yeah,
that's the blackmail. I think if you accept the ring, it must be that's how they kind of try to say that you killed them or something. And
it's cursed.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah, I identify it. It's a cursed ring.
Ironically, I couldn't put it on because I had something else, some other +1 thing on, so I never actually put it on. So anyway. But you said you liked, and then obviously I went to jail at that point and continued on through that sequence. Do you want to speak a little bit about that chapter before we move to the end? Because you said that was your favorite. Probably chapter.
It has a couple things that I like in general. One is that you're coming back to the place where you started, which I always like in a story. An adventure story in particular is like, I go back to where it all began, and things have changed. I've changed, and so that's good. Just generally as a formal thing, I think that's always a good story hook especially for adventure or hero's journey style stories, is like, when you go home isn't like, it was when you left, right? Because you've changed. And so there's that aspect, but there's also this sense of mystery going in there of just what's going on here. Like, I know I'm here to meet them, but they might be doppelgangers, but also like everybody's kind of telling me little bits of what's going on. And it's like, it feels mysterious the whole time you're in the library because nobody's kind of giving you the full picture. And you know that there's this guy, Kovaros, running around, or Koravos rather, and you're like, that's weird. Okay, I guess it's Kovaros anyway. And you're just like trying to piece all that stuff together. And then finally it turns out it is a murder mystery and you're the chief suspect and you get locked in jail. And then you escape out, the hidden passage or whatever, which I also thought was just a good use of a trope. It's not an uncommon thing. That's actually how Elder Scrolls Oblivion begins, right? Is you're imprisoned and you escape. And
Arena too. I feel like they've done that a few times.
Yeah, well, you're always a prisoner, right? And you escape in different ways. But
got it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
No, it was a nice button. I feel like to to leading to the final chapter, for sure. And yeah, no, it was good. So that leads us to the oh yeah, I don't even want to talk about the basilisks there at the end. That sequence and that whole that cavern down there with the spiders and the party. And I did end up realizing I luckily did have protection from petrification or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was the only way I made it through that. Otherwise, but
I cheesed it. I used Samia to find where they were and find a place where Nira could stand and cast fireballs in.
Oh, nice. You Dark Souls did.
I stealthed in and found a spot where she could stand and exploit the fact that they wouldn't know where she was,
and just AOE'd
and just
them.
Yep, multiple times. Yeah, it was pretty good.
Once I had cast the anti-petrification on. I only had 4 of them, but it was enough to they weren't that hard to take down, but I did try various other things before it dawned on me to do that. But yeah, so we leave there, and then we end up going back to Baldur's Gate to confront the Iron Throne. Specifically, we go down into the basement, which leads to, the sewers, and then the Thieves Guild ultimately.
Right. The undercellar first, which is like the whorehouse that's beneath something. You have to kill a couple people there because you need the evidence that they have, and then you make
invitation.
Your way back to, the invitation. That's right. You need the invitation, not the evidence. The evidence is else. You get the invitation off of them. Oh, I missed the invitation because at that point I was trying to get through the game a little more quickly, and I went through and I looked at his stuff and I'm like, he doesn't really have anything I want, and just skipped.
Oh shoot.
So it took me running through the sewers all over the place trying to figure out where I was trying to go, and I had missed the important information that I needed to go to the castle. I think I actually even looked it up because I was like, what am I doing wrong? I've missed something. I had maps open of the sewers. What am I doing? I thought I had to find a secret entrance into the castle.
Yeah.
So I misread. And then I, in addition, did not have the invitation that I actually needed. And I was like, what? What have I done? There was a lot.
That's a killer. That's a killer. If you're in that state, I don't even know.
I spent an hour and a half just running around in the sewers. I found every monster in the sewers because I went through every exit to try to figure out where I was supposed to go. And then I finally just looked it up. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I was like, invitation. What are you talking about? So, and then I found out how to get to the castle from there, which is just going up onto the surface, but that I just totally missed. So
yeah. It's easy to, once you're in the sewers, it's easy to go the wrong direction to get out. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so then we go into the keep. And then that's the fight with Sarevok and the doppelgangers, right? Which is super rough. I was on easy at that point. That might have been actually where I put it on easy and cheesed my way through that as well. But yeah, sounded like a rough battle for you too.
Yeah, that was very difficult, and it's because there is a forced lose condition, which is if the doppelgangers kill enough of the humans, and maybe some particular humans in that room. I didn't really work it out, but maybe the guy that you talked to at the end, Belt, might be the key person that if he dies, it's over. Because there were a number of times where, in fact, once I hadn't even entered the room. I had entered the room to trigger it and then had stepped back out thinking, okay, cool, I can guard these 3 entrances from here. I can sort of take them on one at a time. And then at a certain point, I was killed. And I'm like, that doesn't seem right. And I finally connected that to Sarevok was saying something. I was like, oh, okay. So is he saying, guards, these are the people who killed the Iron Throne or whatever, and you die, which is a weird. That feels like we have to ship this thing. It should be a cutscene. Just kill the player. Kind of solution,
right?
It's like that forces a game over instead of having to do an animation of you in jail forever. Because why wouldn't you just escape? You've already escaped once. So that was funny. But yeah, that is a rough battle, and I did the same sort of thing there where I equipped a bunch of potions and made sure the right people had potions and could just like chew through the character, the enemies.
Yeah.
And even then I had to do it multiple times because they would kill characters. So I had to just like, that character got too close to the melee, Nira usually, so I gotta pull them out.
Yeah.
Put potions on people. Like there was a lot of management there of just being very, very careful, and getting people out of range and stuff that you kind of hand wave away when you play on it, even on a virtual tabletop. You're like, yeah, okay, you can take a potion. And this game doesn't do that.
No, everything's got a discrete time. Yeah, for sure. And it's for the whole kind of like how aggro works in the game is, I guess, it seems random and confusing at times, like sometimes they'll get aggressive toward a specific character that's closest, or sometimes not even that. I don't know. It just was, and then if that character is getting too hit for me, I would have to then use them to kite the enemies around so they didn't die while the others were kind of pounding on the enemies. And so, but I never really kind of understood the rules for that. So proximity based, but then if it's proximity based, unless you're really like fine tuning things, you don't have a lot of control over where characters are going to stand when you enter a zone, so sometimes
right.
Like my most weakest characters were standing in front just because of the way that we came in or something. So anyway.
Yeah, it was very, as a tactical game, it has some issues like that where the rules aren't really clear for the enemies you're fighting. And, I think there is stuff where it's like people who are doing a lot of damage actually end up pulling aggro as well. But it's so difficult to read. I think sometimes it's just like, well, there's a spellcaster and they're not far away, kill them. But there's other times where it's like, Khaled's wailing away on somebody, turn on him, and I never really sussed out any of that. And with the perspective you have, you can't, because there are no like actual UI support to sort of tell you what's going on, and you're in this pulled back perspective, isometric perspective, you can't like read on the characters themselves, right? They don't have that kind of acting ability to tell you why they're doing things. There's no barks, there's no, oh, he's killing us, or anything like that would help you understand. And I think that would help the tactical game quite a lot. So you can understand that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, playing this at a higher difficulty seems completely crazy.
I played it on hard back in the day.
Oh, you did? That's right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was hard. In fact, I got to the end, moving to the maze. I got into the maze. I was like, oh, I thought this was in Baldur's Gate 2, first of all, the maze at the end. And then I was like, oh yeah, I remember this. I couldn't kill any of these Doom Knights or whatever they were called, Death Knights or whatever, the skeletal warriors and all the stuff that was in that maze. I had actually run all my characters past all of that.
Yeah.
When I originally played it. And there's
that's what I did. That's what I did this time.
Yeah. Yep. You can do it.
Yeah.
You can do it. I did it on hard. You can do it. It was tough on hard. There was a lot of me like, oh no, he started following this guy. Okay, well, I'll run that guy the other way so the other ones can get more distance.
Yeah.
Like I did a lot of like literal, like, yeah, I can imagine you did it too.
Because
you would have been in the same, for you, it would have been like playing on hard because those enemies are way too hard for you. Yeah.
Yeah. The equivalent for sure. Yeah. So there's a lot of like, again, like kind of cheesing the AI and stuff. Obviously I was rushing because I was doing that just before we're going to record. So I was rushing through, but, yeah. So then the maze, and then we get through the maze to, I guess it was a graveyard. What is that? What was that location?
It's a ruined city beneath the city.
Oh, that's right. Okay. That's right.
Very eternal darkness.
Yeah. Somebody mentioned that. Yeah. It's very, kind of, cosmic horror-y or something, which, I mean, Baldur's Gate in general, like, the sub property, if you will, even the new, tabletop campaign has a lot of sort of like that sort of like that kind of demonic kind of horror theme to things, and but anyway, so we're in this ruined city. We find I guess a kind of a cathedral kind of thing where he is, and I didn't catch who was with him.
It seems like it's a cathedral to Bhaal.
Right, because it's got the got the symbol
big
on the
skull
ground.
on the ground. Yeah.
Which the trap on the skull? Did you find that? That's pretty hilarious. The skull itself had a trap on it, which
Oh no, I didn't find that.
oh,
Or
yeah.
I might have set it off. What does it do?
I couldn't. There were so many effects going on. I couldn't tell. It was like
Yeah, okay.
probably
Yeah.
poison. At least it could have been multiple things. But yeah, they have an outline of around, like the skull itself was like a bunch of red.
Nice.
Red there. So I unfortunately stood right on it. But at that point, I think that was when I was like, yeah, this is not happening. So, I mean, I was dying instantly. So that's when I actually, for that final battle, I turned on story mode, which obviously is a win button. But what was that? That was a battle like for you?
Oh, that was another brutal, just brutal battle. Because I had to reload so many times. I would try all these different things. I would stealth around, try to understand where everything was. But if you were in stealth, it wouldn't trigger some of the enemies to even appear. Like you wouldn't see them. So I wouldn't know they were there. And then I'd go try some tactic and some new creatures would appear. I'd like, oh, you're kidding me. What ended up working for me was, by this point, Nira had Monster Summoning 2, which normally summons something with like ogre kind of caliber. So to add some sort of meat shields.
Yeah.
And then I snuck her up close enough that she could fireball and do some damage before the battle actually started. I had Khaled with the Oil of Speed and Storm Giant Strength, so that he would just be pounding many attacks, because he gets multiple attacks besides, I think, as a fighter of like whatever level he is, 8th level. So he was just wailing away. And it's funny, I must have done it 7 or 8 times where I just got demolished, just crushed. And then the 9th time or whatever, it was like, hot knife through butter. Like nobody died, nothing bad happened, and just was like, oh, and now Sarevok's dead. Oh, I guess I got the cutscene. Like, what?
Luck of the roll.
Yeah, I mean, just purely, yeah. I just finally like had all barriers just removed. Everything was 20s or something, and it was really wild, because I had people watching and like, "Are you going to be able to finish this?" I was like, "I don't know, I'm having a real tough time here." And Brian, who plays with us, was like, "You didn't do anything different that time, really. It just went well." And I was like, yeah, I know. I finally picked a strategy that I thought I might be able to win, and probably some characters would die, but I would just run the main character out so that it wouldn't end, and hope that Khaled could kind of hit him enough. But it just, everything just went well. Like I guess he maybe didn't make a good save against the fireball, just lots of things. Somebody didn't get, there was a character on their side who cast Stinking Cloud and Web, I think.
Yeah, that happened to me too.
Yeah, and that didn't hit me because I had spread all the characters out. Like, so I just had lots of things go right all at once to make that possible. Which kind of points out the weaknesses of the, we've talked about the sort of the way the dice shake out, as it were, in these kinds of games, as well as just the tactical stuff we were just talking about. And you don't know what to do at that point. And you just like, well, let me try again. All right, let me try some variant on what I just did. All right, what potions do I have? Like, just like, you have this like, flow chart of what to do when it all goes wrong. I'm like, okay, well, let me try that once more. Okay, no, that's not going to work. Okay, what can I do positionally? Okay, what equipment do I have? Okay, any other spells? Maybe I could go out and rest and use different spells. Like, I mean, just you try all these different. You're trying every knob at that point.
It's a trial and error kind of exercise in a way. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's not great. But I do like that this battle feels tough and epic. I just wish it weren't quite so tough and epic.
Yeah, exactly.
I want it to feel like it is. Like,
that's the trick.
It would be cool if, like, I'd be all right if characters were like dying or getting knocked down and like knocked unconscious, if that were a thing. Because doesn't have that. The system doesn't have that, so I guess that wasn't a thing for them. But just like, and then going toe to toe, right, and being like, it's us, we're the last ones standing. Like, I would love if it could shake out that way, and it's just hard to make. this kind of system do that. If you're playing it straight as they are, without a
right.
GM's thumb on the scales. So,
right.
But like Soren Johnson said, I want to just eke out a win, and it's okay if I have to help you make that happen. So
yeah. That's the the trick to bosses in general, and definitely endings. It's finding that right balance of giving it to them, but making them work a little bit for it. But this felt punishing for sure. Yeah.
But it was a different time as far as that stuff goes, for sure, right? I mean, this was definitely a time where the market was still relatively small, and the idea of a game being a challenge to surmount was the prime mode of video games.
Yeah.
Still in the late 90s. And that started to erode basically over the course of that next generation, basically the PlayStation 2 generation, which I guess would have started 2 years later. So,
yeah. And that's why we talk about, I think, Dark Souls so much, is that was sort of like the game that brought it back in a way, right? Or legitimized it again, of being, it's okay to be punishing. It's okay to let players really work hard. And that, so it's now it's an option again, I guess, if you're thoughtful with why you're doing it. Yeah. Well,
so the other thing I would say was a big surprise for me about the ending was literally how abrupt it is. It's like, kill the guy in tactical battle, bam, final cutscene, bam, credits. Like, whoa.
Right.
There's, we talked with Jill Murray about Tomb Raider and how, games don't do a good job of letting you down from the sort of adrenaline high. And this game does not let you down from the adrenaline high. It's like, oh my God, you're having the most difficult battle of the game. And now, okay, well, put the game back on the shelf. You're done.
Yep. And so it did. Yeah. And I wasn't even like fully, because I was asking you about sort of like what the ending really kind of was implying, because I kind of was racing at the end, maybe wasn't fully reading everything I should have been reading, and it's so abrupt that I'm kind of like left with like his sort of Sarevok's energy kind of goes through that hole or whatever, and then I'm like that's like an extended part of that sequence, and then there's that tower where his statue crumbles, and you kind of described it to me, but it felt like it was sort of the beginning of something, you know what I mean, which is probably exactly what they wanted. So there's that. But yeah, did it feel?
I think the implication is like, you have to come here to ascend to become the god of murder, because this is his temple. And then, but beneath the temple are the statues of all the people who could become the god of murder, presumably including one of you, or of the main character, the PC, the main PC. And yeah, so the idea is, I guess there's, we've only seen Baldur's Gate 1 of possibly hundreds.
Right.
So this series is going to last a long time. We've only got 3 so far of ball spawn that we're killing, but there might be more in our future. So,
yep. And I do remember, I mean, I played 2, and you were kind of saying that probably that was the similar story continuing on, as far as like one of Baal's. But to be honest, I don't remember. Like, again, these particular stories for some reason are just bounce off of me, and you'd think me liking what I like that I would have gotten into them, but for whatever reason, they didn't kind of sink in. So, yeah. Anyway, so there you go.
That is the end of Baldur's Gate. Let's take a quick break and then come back and do a little bit of our feedback before we say sayonara.
Okay, sounds good.
welcome back from the break. Since although we're not doing our takeaways this week, I thought I'd tempt and tantalize folks with my book recommendation, and particularly you, Tim, this week. I'm thinking of you particularly with this book recommendation.
Oh, good.
I am going to recommend a book. I'm not sure you've heard of this one, but I think it might be up your alley. Over the weekend, I read a little book called The Crystal Shard.
Oh, okay.
It's about this dark elf who lives on in the light, has these friends in Icewind Dale. I know how much you love Icewind Dale, and I think that this book might be the book for you. Apparently, it's the fourth book, even though it's the first book this guy ever wrote. So I don't know. I guess he was predicting his success. It's the fourth.
Well, I'm reading. Wait, are you being serious right now? Is this the book you're recommending?
This is the book I'm recommending.
Okay.
I did, in fact, read this over the weekend. So.
Okay, because I'm reading it right now too, very slowly, but I am reading it not over a weekend, as the masterful reader that is Brett Duville. But so this is the first, the Icewind Dale trilogy. This is the first. The reason they repackaged them, he did a prequel trilogy about Drizzt that takes place before the Crystal Shard, and then they repackaged and renumbered all of them. But this is literally the first book.
I know. I read the acknowledgments, and it said that it was his first ever novel or whatever. So
yeah.
Like they hadn't actually changed the acknowledgments or whatever as they repackaged it, which I guess I would have thought he would have written another one. Yes, this is where it all started, but now it's the fourth book. That was very funny. But I will say one of the things I liked about it is it had. I would say, my ding would be, I think he has a ways to go as a writer.
Oh, back then for sure. Yeah. But he's definitely, it's not his best.
But it's his first, but I will say I like the form of the thing, which is, it feels like modules, linked modules. It's sort of like a collection of 4 novellas, even more than it is. Even there is one overarching story, but there's sort of 4 distinct parts, and I think each one of them has their own epilogue, even, which does make it feel like a D&D thing, right? So it's interesting as a work of adaptation, similar to what we've just played, that it finds its way to pull in the D&D stuff. So, and it also has lots of good D&D bits, lots of good. A figurine of power or whatever those things are called, in his cat companion, and numerous other things that you're sort of like, I know what that is, things like that. It's all pretty interesting and cool. So I bit the bullet. I actually read it in more or less a single sitting Saturday afternoon. So
nice. Yep.
I just sat at my kitchen table and had a bite to eat and read. I guess that's the only real break I took, was to cook. But yeah, it was a fun read. I don't think I'm going to go and read the other 300, but it was fun to read one.
Sure. You get some good Icewind Dale sort of references and backstory stuff there too that will could have an impact.
It helped me understand the geography in a real way. In the campaign, and like what the spaces mean and where different peoples are, and like sort of what the towns are like as well. I actually think the setting is a real strength of the book as well as the form, which I think is pretty good. But the setting and sort of like the bickering between all these towns and them having to come together, it ends pretty well. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff. It's funny. I honestly felt like the best drawn character in some ways was the enemy, the wizard. Because you really get a sense of his motivations way more than any other character. which is funny.
His introduction is what happens to him in the beginning is
exactly.
It's good.
It's good, and then you sort of see like the kind of person he is and why he would make the choices he makes. And I actually thought that was actually a strength as well. I'm glad I kind of turned to that, because that doesn't. I wouldn't say that sort of interiority is on display with the other characters. There's kind of glancing at it. So I think there's, like I said, I think he has some room to grow. But yeah, no, I'm not damning with faint praise here. I did enjoy it. It's not the sort of thing I really read anymore, but it was a fun read for a Saturday afternoon for sure. So thank you Thank you for introducing me to the Icewind Dale trilogy, which, as far as I know, is just this one book.
Exactly. Nice. Good. Yeah, it is. It has a lot of good D&D in it, and there's some, again, similar to Baldur's Gate. There's a lot of good like fantasy fulfillment moments. Like a dwarf making a hammer. And and battles that you want to see. And then and then I think Drizzt was he didn't know what he had at the time, right? This was a long time ago, and then of course whatever it is, 30 books later.
I do like there's some good combat description as well. I've been thinking about that right now in my campaign. We're in a little bit of a lull where we're doing something that's a lot more social, also fun, but social in the game. And I was like, oh yeah, you know what? I'm going to sort of rethink how some of my combat stuff, combat description, to sort of on the basis of having read that. So it actually may have some real world application for me as well. So those can be good for that. And for those who are maybe embarking on DMing or something like that, it might be good to give a read to something set in the setting that you're playing in. So anyway.
Cool.
All right.
Good one.
Yep. Thank you. Let's turn now to email. These are sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. We have a couple here on our 5 years, and then we'll do a couple Baldur's Gate and do a bunch more Baldur's Gate next week. But why don't you take that first one, sir?
Okay. Happy anniversary plus adventure game from Raymond. Hi, DGC crew. DG crew. Happy anniversary. Sorry for not writing in for a while. The interesting times we are living in didn't leave me much bandwidth to wax poetic, even though you were and are discussing some of my favorite games. On the topic of first adventure games, my first was Castle Adventure, a game whose name I always forget. I have to find it by Googling something like MS-DOS ASCII art Castle Adventure game. You'd think I'd remember the name since the name is in the keywords I type in Google, but no. Still, it's always stuck with me, even if the name didn't. I believe I played that as well. I'm pretty sure. Actually, we had somebody on Twitter. I don't think it was Raymond. Forget who it was. But anyway, he goes on. There isn't a lot to say about it. Possibly the most interesting thing can be found in the game's technical section on Wikipedia. Quote, the game used the text mode of the early IBM PCs like the 5150. It used special characters from code page 437 to represent monsters, treasures, weapons, props, castle walls, etc. It could thus be played on even the earliest IBM PC display equipment, such as the IBM monochrome display adapter and the IBM 5151 monitor. I've attached the image of code page 437 from the article for reference.
Yeah,
Regards,
in the show
Raymond.
Notes.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's an
definitely
early
played
case
this.
of identifying a good min spec. Making
nice.
sure you find the min spec PC, because the market would have been small. You want to make sure you get as many as you possibly can. That's pretty funny. I had forgotten that they would have the PC would be the 5150 and the monitor would be the 5151. I totally forgot about that, but that is hilarious. That is also sort of a thing with the floating point coprocessor, I believe. Somebody will probably correct me on that, but I think it was the 8086 CPU and the 8087 math coprocessor, I think they called them at the time, which was for floating point. That is a separate chip. Anyway.
Right. I do remember playing, it must have been this one. Obviously, there were various ASCII games. Of course, I believe the original Rogue was also ASCII. Am I right on that? Yeah.
You're right. Yep.
So this one and that one I do remember sinking time into, and comparing it to the Atari 2600 adventure that we were talking about from last episode. I remember sort of the concept of ASCII, the way that this game, vaguely I remember playing it, the thing that I loved about this one obviously is because they were able to have a lot more entities, if you will, because they used, the ASCII characters to do lots of different things with it. So there were many more types of monsters, different treasures, weapons and props and stuff like he was saying. So that was kind of like, and that was my migration from the Atari 2600, as I think I mentioned, into computer games at that point. So this was, another sort of mind-blowing sort of era. And then Rogue being, of course, the legendary one of these.
Oh yeah. I mean, Rogue's great. I also played a lot of NetHack.
Yeah. Right.
On Unix machines. And then, and then later things like Moria and Angband, which are all, ASCII art things. I actually wrote an ASCII dungeon generator once too, just to be like, hey, I should know how to do that. It is fun. It is a fun thing to do. I have another one here from Drew. Subject is congratulations. Hi, Brett and Tim. Congratulations on 5 years of the podcast. Of course, this is a lie, or at least a trick, as while I wasn't a listener from the very beginning, I have been one for most of your run, and despite 2020 lasting approximately 11 years, I simply cannot accept that it can possibly have been this many years, and I'm instead forced to consider this a bold-faced lie, a miscalculation on your part, or a glitch that betrays the simulation in which we are all living. Yes, it's definitely one of those, not the terrifying march of time. I feel much the same. 250 episodes feels like a lot. Like, that's 250 is like buying a big jar of vitamins. It's not podcasts. Anyway, I want to particularly thank you again for the insight you bring to the games you play, which I always find fascinating and, to be honest, often more interesting than the games themselves, as some of the titles you select are not my thing, and so I'm unlikely to ever play them. This I intend as no criticism of your selection. One of the wonderful things about video games is the wealth of options, catering to many tastes. Rather the opposite. The enthusiasm and critique that the two of you demonstrate in your discussions I find edifying, and your perspective and setting of the titles in context of time and technology extremely interesting. As an example, with Adventure, you both managed to transmit a lot of your enjoyment, and also the general way in which the games from our past appear in our memories. Your discussion might seem hard to reconcile with the, shall we say, basic graphics of the VCS version, but we are all familiar with the HD remastering jobs our memories do for us for free. Beyond this, I'd like to extend additional thanks for allowing me to enjoy games vicariously, as despite having loved video games for my whole life, in the past year I've, thanks to gestures at everything, really struggled to play them, despite having seemingly endless time, and the truth is I miss them desperately. I had the same issue for much of the same period with watching films, and given that I make a film podcast, you can see how that was a problem. But my enthusiasm for film has returned recently, so hopefully games are not far behind. Until then, I'll carry on enjoying them through the abstruse mechanism of listening to two game developers talking about having played them. Yes, I accept I'm weird. I'm fine with that. Alas, I already submitted a singing review to you. Well done on your rendition of that, Brett. Thank you. Or I'd send one. To say ideas for such a thing are not often in the back of my mind while listening would be to tell a lie, but I have no reason to punish you. Thanks again, and I look forward to the next 250 episodes, 5 years, with great anticipation. Just lie about the length next time, okay? Catch you on the flip side. Drew. Lot to love there. Thank you, Drew. That was very kind.
That was a great mail. Great email. Thank you.
Email. Yeah, and thank you for listening along, for sure. I also have had, I haven't watched, I watched a movie over the Christmas break. That's the last time I watched a movie. So I'm kind of in the same spot, and this has been keeping games warm for me because it forces me to play. It's been good to have this outlet. So I'm glad for that, and for that matter for D&D, but that's a side thing. But yeah, thanks so much for listening. It's and also for using the word abstruse. I don't get enough abstruse in my daily life, so bring it on. All right, I have one more for you.
Okay, subject: secret weapon bugs, from Edwin. Hi, Tim and Brett. I listened with amusement at Tim finding special armor hidden in Baldur's Gate. It reminded me of this recent discovery of an alien bow hidden in a pile of rocks in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Link in the show notes, which seems to be a bit of a callback to this game, perhaps. I also thoroughly enjoyed your breakdown of the bug you discussed and encouraged you to make bug talk a reoccurring vertical in the podcast. Hearing how Brett broke down all the technical reasons it could have been occurring was great, especially when Tim was able to put on his creative director's hat to explain how instead it could all have been down to a bit more of a hand-wavy design decision with unintended consequences. Keep up the good work, Edwin. Which bug I was reading this and trying to remember which bug
was this was the thing where I got up on the second floor of the inn and I kited the guy down, all that whole thing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, in Nashkel or something. Yeah. I mean, for the non-developers or aspiring developers out there, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how interesting of a podcast it would necessarily be, but there is 250 episodes worth of just talking about sort of like, bugs and filing games or, or just that whole, like it's software, right? At the end of the day, it's software. But then it's software that's merged with creativity, and subjectivity and all this other nonsense, so it's like, it's not like just a typical application or something. And so it is the most maddening, like triage process that I can even imagine. I haven't worked on applications, and stuff. So I'm sure they have their own challenge of shenanigans and craziness, but I can only imagine, that video games, film is essentially, frames, right? It all comes down to frames, and there's a lot of technology involved for sure, and they have their own bugs in the technology. But the output essentially it comes down to frames. So it's like, I don't know. I feel like games are probably a pretty unique beast when it comes to the triage process. It is fascinating.
You mentioned the subjectivity, and I'm like, that's usually my biggest problem is when I'm getting towards the end of shipping a game, I've played it so much, I have lost all ability to tell if it's good anymore. It's just the thing now. It's just what it is. Like there's no, I can't remember if I've told this on the podcast before, but we were getting towards the end of Skyrim. It would have been the summer before it came out, maybe July, something like that. It was basically done, and we were just finaling it, getting a bunch of bugs out, let's say. Doing final polish and stuff, and we had no sense. And Istvan, who typically does the lead artist work on the Fallout series, had not played it till that point, and unlike all the rest of us, and he played it, and he came in and he said, what's great? All of it. What's bad? None of it. And it was like, wow, phew, thank goodness, because none of us know. We have no idea anymore. I mean, I'd already played hundreds of hours of that game. So
yeah.
Anyway,
you get too close. Yeah, you
really do. Yeah. I think that's also true in some other work. Like writing. I think, for example, it's just you and your words, right? And I think you can get too close to them as well. But I do think something like film is different because there's so many different people, and they're just doing the one scene. Unless they're working for Stanley Kubrick, they're doing the one scene 2 or 3 times, not 50 or 60 times or whatever. It can be hard. It can be hard to be as close, right?
Yeah, and I'm also specifically talking about just the bug process along with that, right? Like what is good and what is bad, but then even what bugs to subjectively fix and what not to, and sort of the triage process of like who makes that call, and and I mean everybody knows that games ship with bugs. It's just which ones, and that's just it's such a weird razor's edge kind of process, but yeah. So yeah, we'll talk about more bugs when we find them or see them.
Yeah, for sure. I do though. In the future, I'm going to hand wave away, things that I previously would have identified as bugs as really being driven by creative direction. Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, that was really creative director.
Right. Yeah, that rendering
because of their
bug.
Priorities. This one just happened to get through the cracks. I have a last one here from Matt. The subject is self-imposed challenges. So that actually, I think, goes back to Ocarina for us. Hey, guys. With the craziness that was finals week, the holiday season, and finally returning to work after 9 months, all happening roughly at the same time, I, to my shame, got pretty behind with the podcast and have been playing catch-up since. I apologize for my tardiness, but I just finished up the last OOT episode. Congrats on completing such a large series, by the way. I had an experience regarding self-imposed difficulty I wanted to share. My biggest example of me placing a handicap on myself in a game has been with playing the Pikmin games. Pikmin 1 and 2 are pretty much the only games I replay on an annual basis, and for those familiar with them, one of the key mechanics in both games is that the gameplay is split into a series of in-game quote-unquote days. In Pikmin 1, you have 30 Pikmin days to find the missing parts to repair your spaceship, but you can finish any time before 30 days if you collect all of the ship parts fast enough. Pikmin 2 is similar, except there is no day limit before the game ends. The challenge I created for myself was that for every time I replay either game, that I would try to finish it in a fewer number of Pikmin days than I did prior. This was very fun for a while, as it forced me to get better at multitasking and to use in-game time more efficiently. This did, however, create a problem because I am now at records of 13 days for Pikmin 1 and 18 days for Pikmin 2, and I'm convinced I can now only shave maybe 1 day off of each personal best without using glitches or exploits. In order to do that, I would need an all but perfect run of each game, so I haven't had the motivation to sit down and try. But I refuse to let the game win like this. Thanks as always for the great weekly content. Matt. P.S. Tim, I really enjoyed your interview with MinMax, which we never mentioned on here, and so you should at least probably mention that.
Yeah. Ben Hansen from MinMax, ex Game Informer. He just reached out and they do interviews from time to time, and we had connected through, I think at one point, the Tomb Raider reboot, and then Halo 5, and so it was nice. It was nice of him to reach out. So it was kind of like a general talk about, I guess, career stuff, and talk about the games that I worked on, and we even talked about backpacking some, which I enjoyed because that's kind of one of my big hobbies, and All Those Who Wander, which is not dead but definitely dormant. So it was fun, and we talked about the podcast. I think he's a listener, and they also have a I think it's called Deep Dive. They do a similar sort of thing where they pick a game and they go play it like a book club and kind of over analyze it. And so that we talked about the podcast too. So it was fun. Yeah, check it out. MinMax is cool. It's ex Game Informer folks that are that are making it work. And I think their content's quite good.
Cool. Yeah. No, I watched that. I enjoyed seeing that. Yeah, very, very good conversation, and I will put a link to that in the show notes as well. I can't imagine doing Pikmin 1 in 13 in-game days. I think I actually, the first time I played it, did not finish it in the 30 days.
Yeah, me neither.
Which meant that I lost, and then came back to it years later and took that more seriously. I think I was thinking, they can't really mean that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's Nintendo. They would never.
Right. Come on. Those are delightful games, though, actually. I do.
They're remastering, or they did remaster, at least the first one, I think, on the Switch. I think, or they announced it. Maybe it's not out yet, but I think there's something about that. Yeah.
I still have the Pikmin 1 disc. I'm good. I'm on a GameCube. I'm fine.
Fair enough.
Most people probably don't, but Matt does. So
yeah,
I wish you luck. Shaving off that additional days is you got to have flowcharts and red yarn and all that stuff to figure it out.
To his point though about both Ocarina of Time and his Pikmin story. And I know I said this at the time, but I can't reiterate enough that so this whole conversation about the hearts, I wouldn't say fundamentally, but that is a big, huge lesson learned for me as a designer and a developer. Like, it's something that I mean, in all honesty, I didn't think about in the kinds of games that I usually have been involved with, I didn't think about that as something to really consider. In Halo, it's kind of built in because they have the skull system, and so there's some of that kind of that was a bit of an innovation they did back in the day that has stuck with the games. So that's kind of an example that I didn't really have to think about because it was already there. But thinking about it just as a general concept of like, how do you build in player-driven, self-regulated difficulty, in a elegant way is now kind of a new fascination for me because I've just never done it. So yeah, it's big for me at least.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it definitely comes from a different era where, catering to players who want to make things more difficult. I think that's actually, for people who've played games a long time, that can be a real complaint. I haven't gone that direction myself. I'm more of a like, you know what, easier is fine, because of the amount of time I put into it relative to other things. I like to have time for other things, and I would need a lot more time for games if they were all really, really challenging. But I love that there are ways to do that, the ways to make the games more interesting and challenging for yourself. So
I have an example that's just occurring to me because as we speak, I am we're recording on a Monday, so I'm not streaming.
Yes, you do have a good one.
But Hitman, especially the reboot trilogy that they just finished, the whole structure of those games is built around that concept, right? Like there's multiple ways that you can make the game harder for yourself and then the brilliance of their design on that, which ends up being sort of the quote unquote kind of best way to play it, is they have listed out the ways that you can make it hard for yourself. And then they give you challenges and rewards related to that. So if you really want to do everything in a level, you have to make it hard on yourself and play, like for instance, never use a disguise, right? Just play in his red tie suit or whatever, right? Or they just have basically different flavors to make the level. So it's obviously great replayability and great reuse of content and stuff, but not many games have like turned a whole sort of matrix of options into like an intentional, list of to-dos. So Hitman's a perfect example of that.
Yeah, no, it is really great. I mean, it is one of those things that for me has come up probably most often, thinking of achievements as being a way to like push you into those other ways. It's like one of the only ways I think achievements are genuinely gratifying. I mean, I like them as a to-do list, but also just the idea of like, hey, I bet you didn't think of this. Like, did you know you could, kill 16 guys with one grenade? How can you do that? Well, you try to figure it out, and can be a real fun aspect, meta aspect even of things like achievements. So that would be another thing I would throw out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think they're at their best when they do things like that. All right, well, here we are at the end of another show. We're going to continue and tie a bow on Baldur's Gate next week with our takeaways, and try to get through this mound of email. You can send us reviews on the Apple Podcast app. It's the only way we reach new listeners other than word of mouth. I guess it's just another form of word of mouth, or whatever podcasting platform you use. If we don't read it on the cast, we may not have seen it, so just shoot it our way. We love to read them. And you can, of course, send us email at devgameclub@gmail.com, as our 4 listeners did this week. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com or on Twitter at devgameclub, where you can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end. And
this fellow's on Twitch. You're over there hitting men still, I guess.
I'm still hitting men. Yep. Also at Tim Longo Jr. on Twitch, and Mondays and Tuesdays, usually 6 to 8 Pacific time, and I'm on the last final DLC level of Hitman 2. So probably won't end up being this week, but starting next week I will finally be up to modern Hitman 3 standards, and I cannot wait. There's so many, it sounds like so many interesting levels in that finale. So, and it's just getting great buzz around it. So they've sounds like they've hit it out of the park. So I'm super excited.
Yeah, that's very cool. I love that you can play all the games in the latest iteration of the engine as well.
Yeah,
I think that's super neat, and so it actually adds and changes the games a little bit, I think, too, which is also cool.
Yeah, you get the new mechanics and stuff.
Yeah, a lot of good choices and interesting choices they've made as developers over there. So that's a really cool thing. I've also been back streaming at twitch.tv/Brett Duville. I might dig into Icewind Dale this week.
I was wondering what you were going to do.
Very, very tempted to continue. I don't think I want to dive into Baldur's Gate 2, given how long it is, but I could see maybe some Icewind Dale in my future. So you may see me doing that.
Nice.
Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and of course our new logo is by Mark Garcia. Thank you to all of them. Have fun hunting down the other 664 children of Bhaal this week, and good night.
Good night.